Ladies and gentlemen, there is something sacred about 3 a.m. It's the hour when the world is still asleep, but heaven is wide awake. It's in the silence of that hour that strong women rise, not because they have to, but because something deep within them refuses to sleep. Strength is not always forged in the fire of public battles or on the front lines of leadership. More often than not, it is formed in the quiet places, when no one is watching, when the world is still, and when the heart is laid bare before God. There is a kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't demand to be seen, but carries the weight of generations. It's the strength found in quiet surrender. A woman who rises in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., when the stars still hold dominion over the earth, isn't always getting up because she's fully rested. She wakes because something inside her is stirring. She rises with heavy eyes and a heart that carries burdens no one else knows. And in that moment, when sleep could take her back, she chooses instead to kneel. She bows her head in the silence, not because she's weak, but because she knows where her strength comes from. The world teaches us to measure strength by success, status, and outward control. But there is a sacred kind of power in letting go, in surrendering fear, pride, and the illusion of control. A woman discovers her real strength, not in striving, but in trusting. In those dark and early hours when she whispers prayers no one else will ever hear, she is engaging in a kind of spiritual resistance. She is saying, I will not be moved. I will not let this day begin without bringing my heart before the one who holds it all. There is a depth in her that cannot be shaken. That kind of woman doesn't rise because she's mastered life. She rises because she's anchored in something greater than herself. She knows that she doesn't have to carry it all. She only needs to bring it all to the feet of her Savior. It's not about fixing everything in the moment. It's about laying everything down in faith. That is where her strength is born. That is where she is refined, not in the brightness of day, but in the quiet stillness before the dawn. You see, surrender is not weakness. In fact, it takes more courage to surrender than to keep pushing forward in your own strength. Anyone can fight. Anyone can hustle. But it takes a different kind of spirit to say, Lord, I can't do this without you. That woman is not giving up, she is giving over. And when she does, heaven responds. She may not hear thunder or see fire fall from the sky, but something shifts. Peace enters her soul. Clarity begins to replace confusion. Strength rises where there was weariness. That's the power of quiet surrender. Sometimes she brings prayers soaked in tears. She doesn't always have the words. Sometimes all she can say is His name. But even in that whisper, because the one who hears in secret rewards in the open, her strength is not in having all the answers, but in knowing where to take the questions. She doesn't need to be perfect. She just needs to be present. And she shows up morning after morning, heartbreak after heartbreak, prayer after prayer. The world may never write about her. Her face may not grace headlines or magazine covers, but heaven knows her. Angels surround her, and the kingdom moves because of her faith. She carries her family, her children, her community, not on her back, but on her knees. She doesn't rise to be seen, she rises to intercede. And in doing so, she becomes a pillar of strength, not just for herself, but for everyone connected to her. This strength is invisible to many, but it is undeniable in its impact. It's what holds homes together. It's what keeps hope alive. It's what pushes back the darkness, even when the sun hasn't yet risen. In those sacred early hours, when she chooses faith over fear, surrender over control, and prayer over panic, she is being shaped into something unshakable. She may feel small, tired, and unseen, but in those quiet moments of surrender, she is becoming a warrior in the spirit. For many, waking at 3 a.m. might seem inconvenient, even frustrating. But for strong women, those who walk closely with God, those whose lives are grounded in something deeper than schedules and routines, waking at that hour isn't just a disturbance in their sleep. It's a divine invitation. It's a moment carved out by heaven, a time when the noise of the world has quieted and the heart can finally hear what it missed, during the chaos of the day. At 3 a.m., when everything around her is still, God speaks in a whisper that can only be heard by those who are willing to rise in the dark and listen. She doesn't rise because she has nothing better to do. She rises because her soul is stirred, her spirit pulled by something greater. The burden she carries, the questions she wrestles with, the silent cries she keeps hidden from others, all of it finds a voice in the early hours of the morning. It's not always about answers. Sometimes it's about peace. Sometimes it's just about knowing she is not alone. And it's in that hour, in that quiet communion between her and God, that she finds the strength to face another day. The world will call it insomnia. People might say she's restless, stressed, or just overly anxious. But there's more to it. There's a reason the soul stirs at that particular hour. Throughout Scripture, God moved in the watches of the night. It was in the dark that Jacob wrestled with the angel. It was before dawn that Jesus went off to pray alone, seeking strength and connection with the Father. There's something sacred about the night, something powerful about the hours before the world wakes. Strong women know this. They don't see 3 a.m. as a curse. They see it as a calling. It's not always glamorous. There are no crowds, no applause, no recognition in those moments. Just her, the silence, and God. She might not even be able to form coherent prayers. Some mornings, all she can do is cry. But even that is a language heaven understands. Even her silence carries weight in the spiritual realm. Because when a woman shows up in the darkness, bringing her fears, her hopes, her frustrations, and her faith, something happens. The atmosphere shifts. Her room becomes a sanctuary. Her tears become seeds. Her faith becomes fire. She prays over her children, even if they're sleeping down the hall or grown and far from home. She prays over her marriage, her friends, her future. She lays every fear at God's feet. She intercedes for people who will never know how often she stood in the gap for them. And that's the heart of it. The strong woman who wakes at 3 a.m. is not thinking only of herself. Her strength is not self-centered. It is sacrificial. It is intercessory. It is rooted in love that's bigger than her own needs. And while the world sleeps, while others are unaware of the spiritual battles raging in the unseen, she fights, not with fists, not with words, but with prayers, with tears, with faith that refuses to quit. She doesn't need a platform. She doesn't need recognition, because she knows where true power comes from, and she knows that the quiet place is where heaven meets earth. She doesn't wake at 3 a.m. out of routine or obligation. She wakes because she's been invited, and she answers the call, even when she's tired, even when it hurts. Because deep down, she knows that something happens in those hours that can't happen anywhere else. There's a clarity, a closeness, a stillness that allows her to lay everything down without distraction. It's where burdens are exchanged for peace, where anxiety is replaced by trust, where weariness gives way to renewal. No, she's not weak, she's not unstable, she's not simply tired. She's awake because her spirit is alive. She's awake because her calling is too deep to ignore. And when she rises at that sacred hour, heaven leans in. Angels draw near, and the power of God meets her in the silence. Because the woman who wakes at 3 a.m. is not just awake, she's alive. She's engaged in something eternal, something holy. And though no one else may ever see those moments, they are the moments that make her unshakable. The woman who rises at 3 a.m., quietly slipping out of bed while the world still sleeps, may not realize the weight of what she's doing. She moves through the silence of the house, unseen, unheard, unnoticed by the people around her, but not by heaven. In those early hours, she becomes something more than just a woman. She becomes a vessel of power, a voice in the gap, a foundation on which the next generation will stand. Her prayers, whispered in the dark, carry more influence than most people will ever know, because the woman who rises to pray doesn't just seek comfort for herself. She becomes a force that shapes legacies. She understands something that many overlook. Change doesn't always begin in public. It starts in the private places, in the quiet moments where faith is forged and battles are fought in prayer. She knows that the loudest voices aren't always the most powerful. Some of the greatest victories are won in silence, on bended knee, with tear-streaked cheeks and hands lifted in surrender. The world may never know how many times she called out for her family, how many times she stood in prayer for her children when no one else was watching. But those prayers don't vanish into the air. They rise to the heavens and ripple through time. This kind of woman doesn't pray out of routine. She prays because she believes. She believes that God hears her, even when the answer hasn't come. She believes that change is possible, even when everything looks the same. She believes in breakthrough and healing and restoration, and she fights for it, not with force, but with faith. That is the strength of her legacy. It's not just what she accomplishes in the day, but what she sows in the night. Her legacy isn't just built in the spotlight, it's established in the secret place. What she builds in prayer will outlive her. What she lifts up to God in the middle of the night will become a covering for her children, a shield for her home, and a guiding light for generations yet to come. Her strength is not just for survival, it's for influence. She doesn't just endure, she empowers. She sets the tone for the atmosphere in her home, not with demands, but with devotion. She creates space for peace, not by controlling every detail, but by surrendering every detail to the one who controls all. When her children face struggles, they will remember the warmth of her prayers more than the weight of her words. They will recall the way she quietly trusted God even in hard seasons. They may not always see it in the moment, but one day they will recognize that their strength came from her prayers. The peace they walked in was bought in the early hours of her intercession. The doors that opened for them were unlocked by her faith in the darkness. The woman who prays at 3 a.m. doesn't need to see immediate results to know something is happening. She understands the power of planting seeds. She knows that sometimes prayers take time to grow. But she remains faithful. She keeps watering the soil with faith and tears, trusting that God will bring the harvest in His time. Her strength is not in the immediacy of results, but in the consistency of trust. She doesn't need recognition. She doesn't need to be praised, because she knows that the impact of her prayers is far greater than applause. And though she may grow tired, though the weight of life may press hard against her, she keeps showing up, because she knows the cost of not praying is far greater than the sacrifice of sleep. Her strength is quiet but unyielding. Her faith may not make headlines, but it makes miracles. Her prayers reach beyond her lifetime, shaping the hearts and futures of people she may never meet. She is a warrior clothed in grace. She is a protector wrapped in peace. And in the silence of 3 a.m., she builds something eternal. Not with bricks or blueprints, but with faith, love, and a heart surrendered to God. Her legacy is not built in a day, but in thousands of unseen mornings where she chose to rise, to believe, and to pray.